Now, arguably one of the most famous ships in history, the Titanic, took its first and final voyage 100 years ago next month. Valentine Palmer's great uncle, Charles Lightoller, was the highest-ranking surviving officer aboard the liner. However, since Charles died, conspiracy theories and inquests about his involvement with the ship have come to surface. So Valentine has written a book on his great uncle, known to him as Bertie. A warm welcome to the show, Valentine. Thank you for coming in. Why do you think it is so enduring, the interest in this ship? We all know what the ending is, don't we? We all know what happens, and yet still, the intrigue abounds.
I think there's a terrible romance, actually, about all those people dying, and the fact that a whole lot of them were the wealthiest people in the world, and a whole lot were actually very poor immigrants making for New York. So there's this incredible contrast that in the end, in the end, class didn't count because they all went down. So it's partly that. And also, of course, the ship was supposedly unsinkable. It was the greatest, most expensive, most luxurious ship ever, and down she went.
I mean, in a way, you can see why conspiracy theories, which we'll go into, would start to surface, because it just all seems so implausible, didn't it? Let's have a little look at a clip from the fantastic feature film, of course, multi-Oscar-winning James Cameron film. It's being released on 3D. What did you make of the film?
Well, I thought it was terrific. I mean, Cameron's a perfectionist, of course, so he gets everything technically right. And then he's very smart, so he grafts on this amazing love story onto it. So you can't go wrong, really, can you? No,
I mean, it was just a labour of love, wasn't it, for him? It was very difficult to make. But now Julian Fellowes has come out, who's got his own version coming out on television there this Sunday, it starts, and he said, actually, he got it all wrong, James Cameron.
Well, maybe they both got it wrong. Because the thing is, we don't really know what happened 100 years ago, do we? Because we've got no proper record of what happened.
But you've got a bit more knowledge than most, haven't you?
Right. And then he's very smart, so he grafts on this amazing love story onto it. So you can't go wrong, really, can you?
No, I mean, it was just a labour of love, wasn't it, for him? It was very difficult to make. But now Julian Fellowes has come out, who's got his own version coming out on television there this Sunday, it starts, and he said, actually, he got it all wrong, James Cameron.
Well, maybe they both got it wrong. Because the thing is, we don't really know what happened 100 years ago, do we? Because we've got no proper record of what happened.
But you've got a bit more knowledge than most, haven't you? But it didn't come out straight away, did it? Your uncle didn't talk about it?
No. It was very interesting. I mean, I was just a small child, but I met him several times, and I had a lot of conversations after he died with his sister, my grandmother, and nobody would come out and tell me much about the tragedy, and he particularly wouldn't talk about it, and the family didn't talk about it. They just said, oh, he's a hero. It was really kind of strange.
Yeah. And he, as a man that you met then, obviously, it was a long time had passed.
Yes.
And he'd done many other things in his life. What did you find out about his early life?
Well, his early life was extraordinary, of course. He was an adventurer. His mother died just after he was born, and when he was 13, his dad eloped with one of the maids who he'd impregnated. So there's a scandal, because, I mean, that's his Victorian times.
This is a good film on its own.
Yeah, it is a movie. And then, at the age of 13, he runs away to sea, and he's in those great schooners and those windjammers, climbing 200-foot sail, and putting the sails up. So, and then he became a hobo. He rode the railways. He was looking for gold in the Yukon. Had this incredible life. And then he eventually ends up with the White Star Line in about sort of 1900, works his way up to second officer on the Titanic. But the point is, he'd never had any parents. So always the captain of the ship or the owner of the ships was his parents, was the person that he was responsible to.
So he had great loyalty.
Yeah, he did. He was a company man.
So had there been anything that he thought was untoward, he perhaps wouldn't have revealed that because of the loyalty, and perhaps because he also thought it might affect future promotion.
The phrase he uses in his autobiography was, he says, during the investigations, a firm hand had to be kept on the whitewash brush. It was a whitewash, because nobody was ever prosecuted.
No. How did he escape? Where did he end up?
Well, actually, I think he was made an offer he couldn't refuse by J. Bruce Ismay, who was the owner and managing director of the line, because he behaved very strangely, and he was very evasive at all the investigations. And I think the promise was he would get a ship of his own, which is what he was expecting.
Are you convinced, then, that he knew something?
Oh, yes. And he didn't get a ship of his own. He ended up running a bed and breakfast, and it was only the First World War that got a commission in a naval destroyer.
It's interesting if they let him down later on. He didn't get his ship, that he didn't feel at that point, actually, I'm going to tell the truth, I'm going to tell the story.
No, he doesn't. But then there's so much we don't know, isn't there?
So what do you think, having investigated and written it all down, the conspiracy theories, let's go through them, for example.
Okay.
About the Olympic and the Titanic.
This is the big thing. If you search diligently and you go to enough YouTube videos, you will find there is almost, and I say almost, conclusive proof that there was a swap. And ships have been swapped before for insurance purposes. Now, that's what happens.
They're alongside each other, the Olympic and the Titanic.
They're identical.
Yeah.
And they're from the same set of plans.
And the Olympic had a problem. It had a little accident.
It had a big accident. It got itself rammed by a naval destroyer, and there's like an enormous hole in it. And that meant it was going to cost White Star Line a fortune to repair it, and it had to be taken out of service, so they were losing a fortune because it could no longer be on the North American run, which is what made their money. So if you had that problem, you couldn't afford to repair it, you were losing a fortune because you couldn't run the thing, what would you do? Well, a smart thing would be to sink it, wouldn't it?
But it would have to be repaired to be seaworthy in the first place. It couldn't set off like that.
Yeah, but you can make it seaworthy enough to drive to the middle of the Atlantic.
Right. So that's one theory.
That's one theory.
They sent out that ship knowing that it was going to have an accident. And to kind of add weight to that argument, there is the steering conspiracy theory.
There is. Yeah, my second cousin, Louise Patton, says that she had conclusive proof from her mother, who got it originally from Lightoller, that the steersman turned the wrong way in an emergency. It's a long and complicated story, and it could be, but there's so many things that went wrong.
And he didn't have any binoculars.
No,
either.
there were no binoculars. They didn't have lookouts in the right place. They were allegedly going full speed in the dark in a place that was full of icebergs. I mean, it was just... And this was all to do with Ismay, the owner's ego. He was driving the boat. And even when they'd had a crash, he insisted on steaming ahead, so she filled with water much more quickly.
And they didn't start getting the water out for about 45 minutes.
No. Now, why would you not take the water? Why would you not start the pumps for 45 minutes when you've had a terrible accident and got a rip in your boat? Well, you wouldn't start them if by any chance...
It would mean you'd survive. The boat would survive.
Well, if you had the pumps reversed. Because the way you scuttle a ship, which is a controlled sinking, you have the pumps reversed. Instead of pumping out, they pump in. And you'd be kind of reluctant to start that, wouldn't you?
You would if you were hoping it would sink.
Yes.
Now, Ismay, of course, got off the boat.
Yep.
Your great uncle got off the boat.
Yes.
But there was a meeting of some very senior men on the boat just before the accident.
Just before she finally went down, there was this meeting, and I think it was between the captain, the first officer, and the second officer, all the senior people. And I think at that they said, how are we going to cover our tracks for our incompetence?
Did those people who were in that meeting all get off the boat?
No, only my uncle.
Right.
Nobody else got off the boat.
Apart from Ismay?
Yeah.
So how did he get off then? Where did he...
Well, he's always said, I didn't leave the boat left me. And yet it's quite conclusively shown that actually that's not true, that in fact he did dive off the boat and swim away. He got onto an upturned lifeboat, got lots of other people on it and got a medal and became a hero. And
then afterwards he went on and he ended up becoming a war hero, didn't he?
Well, yes, in the First World War he got command of a destroyer. He managed to shoot a Zeppelin, ram a U-boat. In the Second World War he was engaged as a spy, and also, of course, he and his wife in their little wonderful yacht Sundowner, they made these trips to Dunkirk to rescue all the Allied troops off the beach who were under heavy fire. So
he's such an intriguing character, because on the one hand, you know, you think that is it plausible that he would keep this to himself? He's obviously got really good motives in life to go on to do what he did, or maybe he did that because he felt guilty about what he was involved in the first place.
In the book I draw a parallel. I draw a parallel with Conrad's Lord Jim, who jumps ship with disastrous results and spends the rest of the book trying to become a hero and justify it. So that's another possibility.
I bet you had a great time collecting all of this together.
Yeah, it was quite exhausting because you've got to be selective.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming in to talk about it. I hope it goes very well. And you can see more about the amazing story of the Titanic by watching Inside the Titanic. It's on Channel 5 this Thursday at 8 o'clock. After the break, Harvey joins me and we've got tips to beat hay fever, so don't you go anywhere.